I'm Brielle, I'm 29, and my father didn't just ruin my engagement, he smiled while doing it. So I let his own secrets destroy the marriage he tried to protect. I used to think rock bottom would be loud, screaming, crying, doors slamming, explosions. But when my world collapsed, it was quiet, clinical. A conversation over coffee that felt more like a firing squad than a breakup. It started with 5 words: I just can't trust you. That's what Damien said. My fiancé. The man I was supposed to marry in 6 months. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you, comment below and subscribe, because trust me, you're not crazy. And you are not alone. We were sitting at our favorite table in the corner of the cafe where we'd had our first date. He looked like he hadn't slept. His jaw was clenched. His hands wouldn't stop moving, tapping the table, wiping his mouth, twisting the napkin in his lap. I blinked at him, stunned. What are you talking about? He took a breath. Your dad told me everything. I felt my blood go cold. Everything what? About your money problems. The student loans you never told me about. The credit card you defaulted on. That you got evicted after college. I just sat there, stunned. Like my soul had left my body and was watching from across the room. I wasn't ashamed of those things. Not anymore. I'd worked hard to get out of the hole I was in during my early 20s. I had a good job now. I'd paid everything off. I hadn't even used that credit card in 4 years, but I hadn't told Damien. Not because I was hiding it, but because it was my past. And I wanted to share it when I was ready. On my terms. I stared at him. He told you that? Damien nodded. He said if I was smart, I'd reconsider getting tied to someone who hides their failures. I couldn't breathe. That night, I sat in my apartment and stared at my phone, my chest on fire. I'd never hated anyone the way I hated my father in that moment. He didn't just betray me. He sabotaged me. On purpose. Let me backtrack for a second. My father, Lawrence, was always the respectable one. The guy everyone liked. Navy blazer. Firm handshake. Weekly tea times. Big words. Bigger ego. He was the kind of man who used phrases like tough love and realism to justify cruelty. He said he wanted the best for me, but really, he wanted the best-looking version of me that he could parade in front of his colleagues. When Damien came into my life, my dad was polite, but distant, handsome guy, he'd said once. Not sure he's built for long-term success, though. He never liked anyone I dated, but with Damien, it was different. He smiled in front of him, asked about his business, toasted us when we got engaged, and all the while, he was collecting dirt on me. To weaponize, like love was a chess game, and I was just another piece he wanted to control. I called him that night. He picked up on the second ring. Hello, sweetheart. Why would you do that? I asked. My voice was shaking. Why would you tell Damien things I trusted you with? Things that weren't even your place to share. There was a pause, then he sighed. I was protecting you. From what? From a man who would walk away just because he found out you're not perfect. I was speechless. He continued. If he can't handle your past, he doesn't deserve your future. I stared at the wall, mouth open. You set me up. You knew what you were doing. He didn't deny it. You needed to see the truth, he said. Before you tied yourself to someone weak. That's when I hung up. I didn't yell. Didn't cry. Just sat in silence, heart pounding, because I realized something I'd ignored for years. My father didn't want what was best for me. He wanted control, and when I slipped out of his grasp, when I started building a life he didn't dictate, he decided to burn it down. But what he didn't know was that I knew things too, things I'd kept locked away for years, because I thought that's what daughters did. They protected their fathers' reputations. They kept quiet. They swallowed the stories that didn't match the good family image, but not anymore. That was the night I decided I wasn't going to protect him anymore, because if he was willing to set fire to my future to keep control of his little kingdom, then maybe it was time someone lit a match under his, starting with his marriage, because here's the thing, my father had secrets too, ugly ones, and his wife, my stepmother Janine, had no idea who she was really married to, but she was about to find out. Growing up, I learned early that in our house, truth was a matter of presentation. We didn't talk about feelings. We crafted narratives. Everything had to look good from the outside. Whether it was or not. That's how my father operated. Everything ironed. Tidy. Polished. Our family photo albums were curated like campaigns. Janine, my stepmother, always wore pastel. My little half-brother, Cole, was perfectly styled in button-downs and khakis. And me, I was the slightly too loud accessory. The from his first marriage daughter, meant to smile in group shots, but never actually take up space. Janine was sweet. Kind, even. But naive. She believed my dad's world, the country club, the business trips, the golf weekends with the guys. She believed the version of me he presented. Brielle's a little dramatic, but she means well. She believed everything he told her, and I let her, for years. I thought I was protecting her, until he blew up my life. After Damien left me, I didn't go home for weeks. I ignored family texts. Missed Cole's birthday dinner. Let the silence grow like mold around me, but I knew what I had to do. It started with the safe in Dad's office. Growing up, I'd only ever seen it open twice. It was hidden behind an abstract painting in his study, a huge, hideous canvas with navy brushstrokes and a plaque underneath that said loyalty. The combination was his anniversary with Janine. Cute, right? He kept documents in there. Contracts. A second phone. I knew because I'd caught a glimpse of it once when I was 15, looking for printer paper. A phone that wasn't his. At the time, I didn't ask questions. I assumed it was work-related, but now I knew better. So I paid Cole to let me into the house one afternoon while everyone was gone. He didn't ask why. He just shrugged and said, "Leave the Xbox on when you go." I found the safe exactly where I remembered. I entered the code. It clicked open. Inside, passports, cash, a second bank ledger, a stack of photos, and the phone. It was still there, dead, covered in dust. But when I charged it back at my place, it came to life, and what was on it? Everything. Messages with women. Dozens. Some local. Some from cities I knew he visited for conferences. Photos. Inappropriate texts. A folder labeled Vegas that made me nauseous. But the worst. The voice messages. He'd saved them. Like trophies. Some were flirty. Some were not. One woman sobbed on the phone, begging him not to ghost her after he promised to leave his wife. Another said, "You said you loved me. You said I mattered." One even mentioned Janine by name, said she knew about her, knew about me, and still fell for him. He never responded, just archived the audio and moved on. There was enough on that phone to blow up everything. But I wasn't going to send it to Janine anonymously. No, she deserved to hear it from someone who knew what he was capable of. She deserved context. Care. Truth. She deserved me. So I waited until I knew she'd be alone. A Thursday morning. Dad was out of town, golfing in Palm Springs with his longtime clients. I showed up at her door with 2 coffees and a box of lemon scones from the bakery she loved. She opened the door, surprised. "Brielle? Can I come in?" She stepped aside. The house smelled like cinnamon and floor polish. She wore yoga pants and a loose sweater. Her hair was in a messy bun. "You okay?" she asked, walking toward the kitchen. "No," I said softly. "But I'm ready to tell the truth." She turned, coffee in hand. "What do you mean?" I pulled the phone from my bag, set it on the counter. "I need to show you something." She looked down at it, then at me. The look in her eyes shifted, slowly, from curiosity to concern to quiet, dawning dread. "What is that?" "His second phone," I said. "The one he didn't want anyone to know about." I didn't rush. Didn't push, just opened the gallery, clicked play on a voice message. The one from the woman who knew about us. Janine stood still, her face blank at first, then pink, then white. She leaned on the counter as the message played, her hand trembling. When it ended, she whispered, "How long?" "I don't know." I opened the messages, let her scroll. She stared for minutes, silent, still, then said, "Why are you showing me this?" Her voice cracked. I swallowed hard, because he ruined my life to protect his. Because he doesn't love anyone but himself. Because I'm tired of pretending. She looked up at me, eyes full of tears. I didn't want to believe it. "I know." I sat beside her. "For years, I watched you believe he was everything he pretended to be. I let you believe it because I thought you were happy. Because I thought you were safe. But after what he did to me, I stopped." Tears hit my throat. I can't stay quiet anymore. She wiped her eyes, then asked, "Did you love Damien?" "Yes." "Did your dad really?" "Yes." She stared down at the phone, the silence stretched. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I think I always knew." I blinked. He traveled too much. Lied too easily. Always had a reason why the truth was too complicated for someone like me. She shook her head, eyes glassy. "I just didn't want to lose the life I built with him." I understood that. I really did. But then she looked at me and said, "He doesn't get to keep the house." And I knew. She was done. I stayed with her for hours. We made tea, sat on the porch. She told me things I never knew about the early years. The red flags. The moments she chose to ignore. By the time I left, we weren't just stepmother and stepdaughter. We were allies. Two women finally choosing themselves. Together. Dad came home 2 days later to an empty closet and a lawyer's letter on the kitchen table. He called me. Once. Then again. I didn't answer. Then he left a voicemail. "You've always been vindictive, Brielle. I hope you're proud of what you've done." I smiled when I deleted it, because for the first time in my life, I was. My father once told me that there are two kinds of people in life, builders and breakers. He said it with that smug little half smile of his, while sipping bourbon on our back patio, his words drifting like smoke into the summer air. "You're a builder, Brielle," he said. "You make things people want to protect. That's your strength. Just don't forget, sometimes, breakers wear the same face." At the time, I thought he was talking about someone else, but now I know exactly who the breaker was. It was him. He didn't just destroy my engagement. He watched it fall like a man tossing a lit match over his shoulder and walking away before the flames hit the curtains. But this time, I didn't play the daughter who swept up the ashes. This time, he was the one who came home to rubble. After Janine left, the whole house cracked like ice under pressure. She didn't just move out, she erased herself. Her clothes, her photos, her perfume bottles, gone within 24 hours. And she didn't do it quietly. She hired a moving service, while Dad was still gone. Boxes stacked in the driveway, neighbors watching. She didn't try to cover for him this time. Didn't offer polite smiles. When one of the neighbors, Mrs. Rowan, asked if everything was okay, Janine looked her dead in the eye and said, "Lawrence had other commitments. I've decided to let him keep them." That quote made it to the neighborhood group chat by lunchtime, and Dad, he lost his mind. He called me first. 3 voicemails in a row, all rage, all blame. "You think you've won, Brielle? You've always been jealous. Always wanted to tear down what I've built. What kind of daughter betrays her own father?" I didn't reply. I didn't have to, because Janine was already speaking. She hired a lawyer, filed for divorce with cause, and attached the contents of that second phone as documentation. Texts, photos, voicemails, all of it. Dad tried to downplay it, of course. Told people she was emotional, that I manipulated her, but the damage was done. And this time, no one bought his polished performance. Because Janine, she wasn't messy. She was prepared. She gave statements. Calm. Collected, and she told the truth. Not just about the infidelity, but about the emotional manipulation, the power games, the way he played all of us, me, her, even Cole, like chess pieces in some ego-driven version of life, where he always came out king. It was like someone lit a match under his whole persona. Suddenly, people started talking. One of his golf buddies remembered a story about him flirting with a server on a business trip. Another, a client, mentioned how strange it was that Lawrence always traveled solo, even to couples retreats, and Cole, he didn't want to see him anymore. "Mom said I can choose," he told me on FaceTime, one night with tear-streaked cheeks. "And I don't want to go there." He lies too much. It hit me in the chest, not because I wanted Cole to forgive him, but because I knew what it felt like to be that young and already done protecting someone who never deserved it. I told him, "That doesn't make you a bad son." He wiped his nose. "Then what does it make me?" I paused, then said, "It makes you brave." We watched a movie over Zoom that night. A dumb comedy. We laughed until we cried, and I realized some things do survive the fallout, and those things, they're worth fighting for. In the weeks that followed, The fallout kept unfolding. Dad's consulting business took a hit. He lost 2 long-term clients when the news got out. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the reputation hit. He was known for discipline, for mentorship, integrity. His tagline read on LinkedIn, and now his name was linked to screenshots and divorce court documents. But the real consequence was the silence. No Janine. No Cole. No loyal daughter showing up to Sunday brunch to smooth things over. He was alone, for the first time in probably 20 years. And I didn't feel sorry for him, not even a little, because I remembered what it felt like to sit across from Damien in that cafe. To hear him say he couldn't trust me. To feel everything I'd worked for, built for, be questioned because of a man who wore a tie like armor and smiled while slicing people open. No. I didn't feel sorry. I felt done. A month later, I ran into Damien at the bookstore. He was in the self-help aisle. I laughed internally at the irony. He didn't see me at first. Then he turned, eyes widening, and froze. We hadn't spoken since the day he left. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Hey. I nodded. Hey. He looked different, smaller. Not in size, in energy. Can we talk? He asked. I hesitated, then gestured to a nearby bench. We sat in awkward silence for a second. Then he said, I heard what happened. I didn't say anything. He kept going. I didn't know how much he'd twisted things. Not until later. People started talking. Janine. Even Cole. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was sitting across from the man who broke my heart. I felt like I was looking at someone who finally realized he was holding a puzzle with the wrong pieces. I should have asked you, he said. I should have trusted you. I nodded. Yeah, you should have. He swallowed. I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. Or performative. It felt real, but I didn't rush to forgive him, because some things, they take time. I stood. I hope you're doing better, I said. Then I walked away. He didn't follow, and that weirdly felt like closure. Not the apology, the fact that I could leave without needing anything from him anymore. That night, I went home and lit a candle, sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter I'd been holding in my chest for months. To myself. To the version of me who sat crying on that cafe bench. To the version who once begged her father for approval. To the girl who kept secrets to keep peace. And I wrote, you don't owe loyalty to the ones who shatter you just because they're family. You owe truth to yourself. Always. No more shrinking. No more silence. No more pretending the fire isn't burning just because no one else wants to smell the smoke. I folded it, slipped it into the back of my journal, and slept better than I had in years. Because I knew who I was now, not a victim, not a daughter playing defense, not a woman trying to earn respect from men who didn't deserve her. I was a builder. Of truth. Of boundaries. Of a life no one else would ever control again. Grief doesn't always come after death. Sometimes it shows up after relief. After you've escaped someone's orbit, stopped spinning in circles for their approval, and finally stood still. Long enough to realize you're free. And you don't know who you are without the weight of their grip. That was me. In the weeks after my father's life fell apart, I started waking up with a strange emptiness. Not sadness, not guilt, just space. For years, everything I did was filtered through him. How he might respond, what he might say, whether he'd approve. Every job I took, every outfit I wore to a family dinner, every guy I introduced to him. He was the voice in the back of my head I didn't ask for. The one that always said, be careful what you share. Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass me. And now, he was gone. Not dead, but removed. Cut out like a tumor that left a scar so deep I wasn't sure if the flesh around it would ever feel like mine again. It started hitting me in strange ways. One night, I bought a new couch. Bright blue. Not gray or beige or tasteful, but blue, and I stared at it in my living room for an hour, wondering what he would say if he saw it. He'd probably raise an eyebrow. Make some comment about resale value. What happens when you want to sell and no one wants a couch that looks like it belongs in a cartoon? I laughed out loud, then flipped him off, even though he wasn't there. That was the night I realized something I hadn't said out loud before. He never liked me. Not me. He liked the idea of me. The version he could shape and present and manage. The real me, too loud, too sensitive, Too independent. Too much. And I'd spent years trying to be less, just enough to keep his love. But no more. It's a strange kind of freedom when you stop chasing love you were never meant to earn. I started filling my space with things that felt like me, books he'd call emotional fluff, paintings that were messy and wild and made no financial sense. I took a weekend trip to Portland just because I wanted to, ate alone, read in cafes, talked to no one. It felt like coming home to myself, but while I was learning how to breathe again, Dad was suffocating. He started reaching out. Text at first, "We need to talk. What you did was unforgivable. You've embarrassed me." Then he switched tones. "Can we sit down like adults? I miss you. Let's fix this before it's too late." I didn't respond. Not because I hated him, but because I had nothing left to give him. He built a world where love had conditions, and I'd finally stopped paying rent. But the silence didn't stop him. 2 months after Janine filed for divorce, he showed up at my office. I was working late. The front desk called and said, "There's a man here. Says he's your father." I froze. I could have said no, but something in me, maybe the part that still needed the final act, said, "Let him in." He walked in wearing a charcoal suit and the same cologne he's used for decades. Expensive. Strong. Overwhelming. He looked older, not in years, but in posture. Smaller. He sat across from me like a client. Cleared his throat. "I've made mistakes," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "That's one way to put it." He didn't argue, just looked down at his hands. "I thought I was helping you. With Damien." I laughed. "You thought blowing up my relationship behind my back was helpful?" "I thought he was weak." "No," I said. "You thought I was too strong. And that scared you." He blinked. I leaned in. "You never wanted me to be in control of my life. You wanted to manage it. And when I stopped needing your permission, you retaliated." He swallowed. "You've always seen me as disloyal," I said. "Just because I didn't bend the way you wanted. But I was loyal for years. I protected your secrets. I showed up. I kept quiet. I played the part. I looked him dead in the eyes until you made it clear that your version of loyalty required me to lose myself." He didn't speak, just stared at the floor. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glassy. "Janine won't talk to me." "Good. She's changed the locks." "Good. I lost Cole. You never had him. Not the real him. You had control. That's different." He stood, walked to the window, then said, "I don't know who I am without this family." I stared at his back, then said softly, "That's not my fault." He turned, eyes sharp. "I didn't raise you to hate me." "No," I said. "You raised me to need you. And when I stopped, you called it hate." We stared at each other, years of silence between us, and then he said the quietest thing I've ever heard come out of his mouth. "Can I fix it?" I stood, gathered my things, walked to the door and opened it. "No," I said. "But you can live with it. Like the rest of us had to live with you." He left without another word, and I cried the second the door closed, not because I felt bad, but because that was the little girl in me, the one who used to beg for his approval, finally saying goodbye. 2 weeks later, Janine emailed me, subject line, "Thank you." She said the divorce was final, that she'd moved to a smaller place, that Cole was adjusting slowly. She said she was starting over at 46. Scared. Excited. Unapologetic. "I only wish I'd seen the truth sooner," she wrote, "but I'm proud that you did. And that you were brave enough to tell it." She signed it, "With love and respect," finally. I printed it, framed it, because when someone tells you they see you now, without conditions, that's sacred. I wrote her back, told her I loved her, told her Cole was welcome at my place anytime, told her I was here for real this time. Not as a daughter who kept secrets, but as a woman who'd finally found her own damn voice. By the time the holidays rolled around, everything was different. No garlands on the railing at my father's house. No coordinated family photo with fake smiles and neutral sweaters. No invitation. Not that I expected one. After Janine left, after Cole refused his calls, after I told him face to face that I was done, my father finally stopped pretending, stopped trying, stopped spinning. He went quiet. And for a man like him, that silence was the unraveling. I heard things, of course. Whispers from mutual acquaintances. A colleague of his bumped into me at a networking event and said, "I'm sorry about your dad." I guess it's true what they say, pride goeth before the fall. I smiled politely. Pride didn't just go. It took him with it. They laughed, nervously. People always do when you stop protecting the man they're afraid to see clearly. I wasn't bitter. I was just done shrinking. But that doesn't mean it was easy. The first Christmas I didn't spend in that house felt foreign. Even though I hated how it used to feel. The performance, the stiffness, the way Janine cooked herself sick while Dad just critiqued the presentation. It was routine, and routine, no matter how toxic, can feel like comfort when you haven't yet built something better. So I made new ones. I invited Janine and Cole to my apartment for Christmas Eve. I cooked lasagna. We played board games. Watched dumb holiday movies. Drank wine. Cole fell asleep on the couch wrapped in a fuzzy blanket and drooling into a pillow like a human puppy. And Janine, she sat next to me after midnight, watching the lights twinkle on my small tree, and said, "This is the first year I haven't cried on Christmas Eve since I married him." I looked at her, and for the first time, saw a woman who wasn't broken, just untethered. "I used to think leaving meant I failed," she said. "Now I think staying would have been the real failure." I nodded. "It takes a long time to see that." She smiled. "But it's clearer now, right? Everything." I looked around my tiny apartment. The crumbs on the coffee table, the mismatched ornaments, the painting I made last month during a wine and canvas night that looked like a sunset accidentally threw up on itself, and I said, "Yeah, it's finally clear." After the holidays, I got a letter, handwritten, from him. I almost didn't open it. The envelope was thick, formal. Cream-colored. The kind of paper you use when you want something to last. I sat on the edge of my bed and peeled it open slowly, heart pounding even though I told myself I wouldn't care. The first line, "I never thought you'd walk away." No apology, just shock. A man surprised that the thing he broke finally stopped crawling back. The rest of the letter was exactly what I expected. Defensive, wordy, full of intentions and misunderstandings, and my generation did things differently. No ownership. No regret, just veiled guilt-tripping wrapped in nostalgia. He ended with, "You're still my daughter, whether you believe it or not. And I will always be here when you're ready to come home." I sat with that for a long time, read it twice, then again, then quietly, without drama, I folded it up and slid it into the recycling bin. Because here's the thing, I am his daughter, but not in the way he meant, not in the obedient, eager to please, performative way, not the daughter who keeps secrets so the family photo looks good, not the one who smiles through betrayal and calls it growth. I'm the daughter who walked away, who saw the fire and didn't run toward it with a blanket. I let it burn. And now I was building something new, not to prove a point, just to live in the truth. About a month later, something unexpected happened. Damien called, not a text, not a DM. A real call. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, not hope, not curiosity, just clarity said, "You can take this." His voice was nervous, softer than I remembered. "Hey, I know this is out of nowhere, but I was wondering if we could talk." No pressure. No expectations. I have some things I need to say. I thought about it for a second, then said, "Okay." We met at the same cafe where everything had unraveled. The moment I walked in, it hit me, not the pain, the contrast. I was different now. My spine felt straighter. My eyes clearer. My silence sharper. He stood when I approached. Pulled out a chair. No smile, just respect. That was new. He didn't waste time. "I believed a man who had a polished lie instead of a messy truth," he said. "And I should have known better." I stayed quiet. "I knew you weren't lying. I just couldn't deal with the idea that I didn't know everything about you. And instead of owning that, I blamed you." I nodded. "You made me feel like I was a liability." His face fell. "I'm sorry," he said, and I believed him. I didn't know what that meant for us, or if it meant anything at all. But I believed him. We talked for over an hour, about what we both carried, what we lost, what we learned. At the end, he looked at me and said, "You look lighter." I smiled. "I am." He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "I'd love to see you again." No expectations. Just coffee, dinner, a walk, something. I paused, looked out the window, then back at him, and I said, I think I'd like that. Not because I needed closure, but because I already had it, and now I had choice. We left it open. He walked me to my car. Didn't try to kiss me. Just said, thanks for meeting me. And I drove away without a pit in my stomach, because no matter what happened next, I knew who I was walking back to. Me. No shame. No second guessing. No silence. That night, I opened my journal, wrote one sentence in bold ink. The daughter I became is the woman I was always meant to be. And I meant every word. After everything, I thought the hardest part would be losing him, but it wasn't. It was not missing him. That was the part that shook me. Realizing I didn't long for his voice. Didn't ache for his approval. Didn't want to rewind and redo and wonder if I'd gone too far, because when a toxic bond finally snaps, what's left isn't grief, it's clarity, and clarity is loud. Louder than love, louder than guilt, louder than the voice that once lived in your head and told you, you're being too emotional, Brielle. No one wants a woman who feels everything so loud. Now, I wanted to feel everything louder. That spring I moved, not far. Just to a new place that had more windows and less history. I didn't take much with me from the old apartment. A few photos. My journal. A worn coffee mug that said, "Bold women break cycles." But most of it, gone, donated, sold, left behind. I wanted the new space to feel like mine. I painted the walls light green, hung art from local vendors, started growing herbs on the windowsill, even though I was famously bad at keeping anything alive. Every day, I'd check on them like they were tiny proof that I, too, could grow in soil that once failed me, and slowly, they sprouted. Mint first, then basil. Rosemary took the longest. But it came. So did I. I kept hearing from people who had once stood silently beside my father. Emails, texts, messages that started with, "I didn't know what he was doing to you." Some felt genuine. Some were just people scrambling to get on the right side of history. I didn't respond to most, not because I was angry, but because I didn't owe anyone access to my peace just because they suddenly remembered how to spell my name. Instead, I poured myself into new things. My work, my friendships, my mornings. I started running again, slow, but consistent. No earbuds, just the sound of my breath and my feet hitting the pavement, and the occasional old man walking his dachshund yelling, "You're killing it, girl." I'd smile every time, not because I believed it yet, but because I wanted to. I reconnected with a college friend named Zoya. We drifted in my early 20s, life stuff, distance, old wounds. But she reached out after seeing a post I'd written about emotional boundaries. We met for brunch. Talked for hours. Like no time had passed. I told her everything: the engagement, the sabotage, the fallout with my father. She stared at me, blinking slowly. "I always thought he was too polished," she said. "The kind of man who smiled with his mouth but not his eyes." I laughed. "That's exactly what he was." She leaned forward. "I'm proud of you. I know you probably hear that all the time, but I mean it." I looked at her, this woman who'd known the 19-year-old me that still straightened her spine when her dad called and triple-checked her tone for anything that might be labeled ungrateful. And I said, "Thank you. I'm proud of me too." Because I was. I really was, not just for walking away, but for staying away. One afternoon in early May, I got a text from Janine. "Janine, would you be okay with me asking Cole if he wants to see you for Mother's Day?" I blinked at it for a long time, then smiled. Me, "Yes. Only if he wants to." "Janine, he does. I just didn't want to assume." So on Mother's Day, they came to my apartment. I made pancakes. Burned one batch. We laughed. Cole brought me a card he drew himself. It had stick figures of the three of us standing in front of a lopsided house. I had a cape on. The caption read, "To the coolest not mom ever. You saved me and pancakes." I choked on my orange juice when I read it. Janine wiped a tear from her eye. I hugged him until he squirmed away and said, Okay, I'm still 9, not 90. Later, Janine and I sat on the balcony, watching Cole play a racing game on his iPad. "He's doing better," she said. "Therapy's helping. So is the distance." "Has he talked to?" "No," she said quickly. "He doesn't want to." I nodded. "I tried," she added. "I encouraged it. But I also told him he never has to see someone just because biology says so. I looked at her. Thank you. For what? For protecting him. And for not protecting him. She laughed, bitter and soft. I spent 15 years covering for a man I didn't realize was bleeding everyone around him dry. I think I've done enough protecting to last me a lifetime. I nodded. We sat in silence for a while. Then she asked, do you ever miss him? It was the question I hadn't let myself answer out loud. So I did. No, I said. But sometimes I miss the idea of him. She nodded, eyes distant. Yeah, that makes sense. Because that's the thing. When someone controls your world long enough, even their absence feels like a memory you don't know how to file. I used to miss his laugh, the way he knew exactly what to say in a room full of strangers to make them like him. The way he could quiet a moment with just a glance. I used to mistake that for strength. Now I see it for what it was, control. And the scariest part, how much of it I used to crave. There's a line I wrote in my journal a few nights later. Freedom doesn't always feel like victory at first. Sometimes it feels like being lost without your captor. But every day, I found a new piece of myself. A smile that wasn't curated. A decision that didn't require approval. A love slow, real, quiet, that didn't need to be proven. Damien and I started seeing each other again. Slowly, cautiously. It wasn't perfect. We had hard conversations about trust, about fear, about what it means to choose someone when you know how badly people can break. But he showed up. Not as the man who left, but as the man who learned. And me, I let him see the version of me I used to hide. The loud one. The one with scars. The one who said, I'm not fragile. But I am human. And if you're not ready for that, then let me go. He didn't. And one night, curled up on my too blue couch, he said, I love you. Not in spite of what you've been through, but because of it. I cried, not because I needed those words, but because I finally believed I deserved them. That summer, I published an essay. It was titled, When the Father You Love is the Man You Must Leave. It went viral. I didn't expect that, but I wasn't surprised, because the truth, so many of us are still trying to love people who only taught us how to survive them, and now, I was done surviving. I was living, and that was the loudest ending I could have written. It's easy to think healing will feel like a straight line. A rising graph. A slow climb upward into peace. But the truth, it's more like the ocean. Calm. Wild. Beautiful. Brutal. Some days I felt whole. Other days, I woke up tangled in old thoughts I thought I'd burned with the rest of my father's legacy. What if I was too harsh? What if I was becoming like him, too cold, too final, too unwilling to bend? But then I'd remember what bending used to cost me. Silence. Self-blame. A version of myself I could barely recognize. One who said, it's fine, when it absolutely wasn't, just to keep a seat at the family table. Now, there was no table. And I wasn't hungry for crumbs. That summer, I got invited to speak at a women's panel in the city. The topic was family, forgiveness, and finding yourself. At first, I almost said no. The idea of sitting on a stage, telling strangers about the deepest rupture in my life? Terrifying. But then I thought about all the women who'd emailed after my essay went viral, all the girls who messaged. I thought I was the only one. And I knew it wasn't about reliving the story. It was about owning it. The event was held at a mid-sized venue downtown. Brick walls. Exposed beams. A floral backdrop behind the podium. Before I went on stage, I stood in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. I looked strong, not in the Instagram sense. I in the real way, eyes steady, jaw relaxed. No part of me was asking, what would he think if he saw this? He didn't live here anymore, not in my mind, not in my voice, not in my body. The moderator introduced me gently. A few people clapped before I even reached the mic. I took a breath and spoke. I used to think betrayal only happened between lovers. But I learned the deepest ones can come from people who share your last name. Silence. Every eye on me. I loved my father. Still do, in a complicated, broken, distant kind of way. But love doesn't make someone safe. And protecting someone just because their family isn't loyalty. It's self-betrayal. I saw women nodding. One woman in the front started crying quietly. I kept going. My father tried to manage me, control me. And when I stopped performing the version of myself that made him look good, He burned down my relationship just to remind me that he could. And when I finally saw him clearly, I didn't forgive him. I left him. More nods, tears, hands reaching for tissues, and me, I didn't shake once. After the talk, people lined up to hug me. To whisper their own stories into my ear. I left my dad after he sabotaged my education. My mom still tells people I'm difficult because I stopped calling her. My sister stole from me and told everyone I was unstable. I haven't spoken to her in 5 years. And all of them ended the same way. Thank you for saying it out loud. Later, I sat alone in the green room, sipping water and staring at the ceiling. I felt weightless, like I'd dropped something I didn't even know I was still carrying. That night, I called Janine, told her how it went. She was silent for a long time after I finished describing the speech. Then she said, "You are everything he was afraid of. Strong. Seen. Loved without lying." I swallowed a lump in my throat. "Do you think he saw the essay?" She exhaled. "Someone sent it to him. I heard through a mutual friend." My stomach flipped, but not with fear, with completion. "What did he say?" "He told them you were exaggerating for attention." I laughed. Of course he did. Janine laughed, too. "He's predictable, if nothing else." "Do you think he'll ever change?" Her voice softened. "No. But that doesn't mean you won't." And she was right, because I already had. A month later, Damien and I took a trip. It wasn't a "we're back together" trip, more like, let's see who we are now in a new place. We went to Santa Fe, hiked, ate too much, slept in late, talked about nothing and everything, and one night, over dinner under the stars, he reached across the table and said, "You're different." Is that a bad thing? He smiled. "It's the best thing." I took a breath. "So are you." We didn't define it that night. Didn't make any declarations. But in the silence between us, there was something peaceful. Two people choosing each other again. Not because of obligation, but because of evolution. And to me, that meant more than any proposal ever could. I got a letter from my father that fall. Typed, cold. He said he was moving, leaving the state. No apology, just a note that said, "If you want to reach out, I'll be at this address." I stared at it, then threw it away, because I knew. I didn't need to reach for him. I wasn't lost. I wasn't missing anything. I had built something so much better in his absence. A life. A home. A family that chose each other without conditions. And most importantly, a self that didn't shrink for anyone. Fall in the city came quietly that year. No dramatic winds or sudden chills, just the soft kind of shift that shows up in golden leaves, early dusks, and the way people start folding their arms tighter as they walk. I was still running, still journaling, still learning how to be a woman who no longer danced for a man who called her daughter, but only loved her when she was silent. It had been nearly a year since everything collapsed, since Damien left, since Janine found out, since I cracked open the truth and let the light burn down the image my father built so carefully over decades. And you'd think, after a year, the story would fade, but in truth, it just deepened. The sharpest wounds stopped bleeding. But the scars stayed hot some days. I still had dreams about him, not nightmares, just those disorienting memory loops where he was normal, smiling, laughing, calling me kiddo. And then I'd wake up, gut clenched, heart racing, and remembered he was real, and so was the damage. That fall, I was invited to a private retreat. A 3-day event for women who'd experienced family betrayal and emotional abuse. The kind of thing I never thought I'd say yes to a year ago, but I was curious now, hungry for stories that sounded like mine, wounds that didn't need to be justified or watered down to keep things civil. So I went. A quiet lodge outside Aspen. Snow-capped peaks in the distance. Crackling fires. No cell service. There were 17 of us, different ages, backgrounds, stories, but the same ache in our eyes, the kind that only shows up when someone who is supposed to protect you became the one who taught you fear. We sat in circles. We journaled, cried, laughed harder than I thought we would. One woman, Elise, shared a story that left me breathless. Her mother had told the entire family Elise was a drug addict because she refused to take over the family business. She lost friends, her fiancé, all because her mother was too ashamed to say Elise had boundaries. She said I was throwing away my inheritance, Elise told us. but all I really wanted was myself. Another woman, Cass, said her brother disowned her for not showing up to her father's funeral. What he didn't say, she added, was that our father beat me bloody until I was 17. But I guess that didn't fit the eulogy. We didn't need soft landings. We needed truth, and every single woman there was done with pretending. So was I. One evening, we were asked to write a letter, not to the person who hurt us, but to the part of ourselves that kept loving them anyway. It cracked me open. I sat by the fire with my journal and wrote, "Dear old me, you tried so hard to earn love. You cleaned your words, softened your tone, bit your tongue so often it bled. You thought that if you were just a little easier to love, maybe he'd stop holding your secrets like weapons. But you were never the problem. Your softness didn't cause the storm. It survived it. You weren't weak. You were just raised to believe your worth was tied to how well you could protect someone else's image. But now you don't live in mirrors. You live in windows. You let people see you, and the ones who can't handle that don't get to stay. I'm proud of you, not for surviving, but for stopping, for saying no more, for walking out of the fire and not apologizing for the smoke. Love always. Your new self." The moderator introduced me gently. I read it to the group the next morning, hands trembling, voice steady. When I finished, a few women wiped their eyes. One just whispered that. And I knew this was what I'd been waiting for. Not an apology from my father, not even closure, just the freedom to say, I lived through it. And I don't carry the shame anymore. The retreat ended with a ceremony. We each took a stone and wrote one word on it, something we were ready to release. Some women wrote shame. Some wrote silence. One wrote him. I wrote loyalty. Not because loyalty is bad, but because the version I'd lived was just bondage dressed in politeness. I dropped my stone in the fire pit and watched it vanish into the smoke. When I got home, I felt different, not fixed, but found. I lit candles, took a bath, wrote Janine and Cole postcards from the mountains, thanking them for giving me back my family, not the blood kind, the real kind. And then I did something I hadn't done in a year. I called my mother. She'd always been a ghost in my life. My parents divorced when I was 4. She moved across the country, started a new life, sent birthday cards with glitter and little checks tucked in, but we never got close. My father had made sure of that. Your mom's too unstable, he used to say. You're better off without her drama. I believed him, but now I knew better. She answered after 2 rings. Brielle? Her voice cracked. It's me, I said. Long silence. Then, I didn't think you'd ever call. I wasn't ready. You don't owe me anything, she said. But I'm glad you did. We talked for 2 hours, about everything, her version of the divorce, the guilt she carried, the years she waited for a daughter who never came. I told her what happened with Dad. She didn't sound surprised, just heartbroken. I try to tell people, she whispered, but no one believed me. Not even the court. I believed her now, and for the first time in my adult life. I wanted to know her. We made plans. Nothing big, just coffee, but it felt like a new chapter. Like maybe the next part of my story wasn't about who hurt me, but about who saw me and stayed. That night, I looked around my apartment. The blue couch, the journal, the postcards waiting to be sent, and I whispered something into the quiet. I'm still here. Not because of him, but in spite of him. Because survival wasn't the ending. It was the entry point. A life that was finally, truly, mine. There's a strange kind of peace that settles in when you stop looking backward, not because the past stops mattering, but because it stops holding you. It had been almost a year and a half since the day Damien sat across from me and said, I just can't trust you. A year and a half since I found out my father had been the one to pull the pin from that grenade and hand it to him with a smile, and in that time, I'd rebuilt my entire life, not from scratch, from truth, and that truth, it didn't include him. Not anymore. I hadn't spoken to my father in nearly 6 months. No texts. No surprise visits. No half-hearted apologies wrapped in manipulation. He was gone, out of state, out of reach, but not out of mind. Because you don't just forget the person who shaped you, even if you've outgrown their mold. What I did was reclaim myself from him, bit by bit, breath by breath. I learned to ask questions like, do I want this, or am I trying to be who he trained me to be? Am I allowed to want softness? Messiness? Joy. Can I still love the idea of a father while also loving myself enough to leave the real one behind? The answer to all of it, yes, 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 and now I was finally living in that truth. The truth where my voice was mine, where my history was mine, where my future was not tied to bloodlines, but to boundaries. That October, I published my first book. It was titled, The Daughter I Had to Become. A memoir, but not about revenge. About release. It told the full story, from Damien.to Janine.to Cole.to the moment I stood in my office and told my father, you can live with it. I thought publishing it would make me feel exposed, but instead, it felt like armor, not the kind that keeps people out, the kind that reminds you, I am not easy to wound anymore. The book did well. Better than I expected. It found its way into the hands of women I'll never meet, and somehow still feel deeply connected to. I got letters, DMs, emails from readers saying, your story gave me permission to walk away. And that was worth more than any review or sales number, because that's what this was always about, not just reclaiming my life, but lighting a path for the ones still trapped in the dark. The night of the launch, I stood on stage at a local bookstore, lights dimmed. Chairs filled. Abby was there. So was Janine, and Cole, 11 now, sitting in the front row with a proud grin and a hoodie that said soft is strong. I spoke slowly, honestly. I wrote this book for the girl I used to be. The one who thought silence was love. The one who believed that if she just got smaller, maybe her father would finally see her. I wrote it for her and for every woman who thinks healing has to come with permission. It doesn't. You get to save yourself. Afterward, people lined up, asked for signatures, shared their stories. One woman leaned in and whispered, I left my father after reading your first essay. I'm terrified. But I've never slept better in my life. I hugged her and meant it. That night, Damien waited until the last guest left to approach me. We were still seeing each other, slowly, quietly. With care. It wasn't the kind of relationship I used to think I needed. It didn't come with fireworks or fairy tales. It came with safety, with soft check-ins, with, are you okay if I hold your hand? He stood at the back of the room holding flowers. I smiled when I saw him. Hey, he said, eyes shining. He handed me the bouquet, then pulled a small, folded note from his coat pocket. I wrote this after reading your last chapter, he said. Didn't know if I should say it out loud. So I wrote it down. I took it, read it, just one sentence. I love the woman you became, not in spite of what you lost, but because of what you chose. I looked up. He didn't ask for anything. Didn't expect anything, just waited. And I realized this was the kind of love I was never taught to look for. Not dazzling, not loud, just true. I love you too, I said. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to, because this time, it was my choice. No one else's. Not my father's. Not his expectations. Mine. We walked home in the dark, hand in hand. No performance. No pressure. Just peace, and peace is loud in the quietest way. That weekend, I got a message from my father. The first in months. It simply said, I read the book. I hope it helped you. No apology. No, I'm sorry. Just that, and for the first time in my life. I didn't need more. I didn't reply. Didn't screenshot it. Didn't let it touch the part of me that used to ache for his validation, because I had mine now. And I was done performing pain for someone who only knew how to play audience when it suited him. I closed my laptop, sat on the couch, and smiled, because this was the ending I never thought I'd get. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a reconciliation. Just release, final, gentle. Complete. So if you're reading this, if you're still in the place I used to be, I want you to know something. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to love people at the expense of your peace. You can say, no more, and mean it. You can write your way out. Cry your way out. Walk your way out. And when you do, there is light. Not perfect, not immediate, but real. And when it comes, it fills every crack they left behind. Not with who you used to be, but with the woman you always were. Underneath, the one who finally said, this story is mine now, and I'm the one who gets to write the ending.